Welcome back, everybody, for the final presentation of the 33rd Annual Ozark Mountain UFO Conference. We have a fantastic guest that we will bring up in just a minute. Before we get to that, I wanted to express some personal thoughts to everybody. I want to, as the Master of Ceremonies for you at this conference, I want to apologize for portions of the last presentation that we had. And I want to explain to you why I'm apologizing. First off, I want you to understand that we in no way ever would censor information. Total free speech and free sharing of ideas is absolutely essential at a UFO conference. Um, but what I want you to understand what we as conference promoters try and do, and what we're really why we're doing this, and it is to be able to present a forum, a platform for the people who are doing the research to share their work, their knowledge, their experiences with all of you. So that's the purpose behind it. So the reason I'm apologizing is that I don't see any value in criticizing other researchers on. Now, it's okay to have, we all have our own opinions about each other and about each other's ideas, and that's okay. I would invite any researcher to share your feelings about other people with that researcher, but to not take conference time to do that sort of thing here. I think that it is unprofessional, and I think that it is a waste of time because we want you to get as much information as you can for the money that you've spent on this conference. Okay, so that's the intent, and really there are the Billy Meyer case, for instance. I think that it is a significant case. It's very important, but it is by no means the only UFO case out there. It is by no means not the only avenue of information or truth or evidence. As you guys know, the UFO phenomenon is extraordinarily complex. It ranges from the physical to the non-physical to, truths and lies all over the place. And it is a very, very hard science to be involved in, and to be able to stand up and believe that you are, telling the truth based on as good a work as you can possibly do. It's really, really very, very hard science to be involved in. So that being said, I would like to introduce Tom Danheiser.
Thank you very much, Forrest, and welcome everybody from wherever you are viewing. Hope you had a last few good days here at the conference. My name is Tom Danheiser. I'm the senior producer of the national radio show Coast to Coast AM. So thank you once again for tuning in, and I hope your last days, like I said, have been very fun and you learned a lot. Nancy does a great job putting this together every year, carrying on the tradition, of course, of her mother, Dolores Cannon. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring the event to the end with the last guest. I'm going to try to introduce him. He really needs no introduction, but I'll give it a shot. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to bring on a 3-time Emmy Award winner. You know him best as the host of Coast to Coast AM, Mr. George Noory. Hey, George, how you doing?
Great, Tom. Thanks, and thanks for us as well. It's great to be at this Ozark Martin virtual UFO conference. And maybe, hopefully, next year we'll be live and in person, and you can all come out to Arkansas and meet us in person when COVID slowly kind of goes away. But we'll see what happens. But it's great being here. And as Tom had mentioned, and let me say a few words about Tom Danheiser. He's been my producer for going on 18 years now at Coast to Coast, and just does a marvelous job. In addition to that, he is the executive producer of Beyond Belief, our television program, and has been just a staple of the program. And when you are making a phone call into Coast to Coast, or tonight, as he'll tell you later on tonight, you're going through Tom Danheiser, and he does a splendid job. So, Tommy, thank you, and appreciate it.
Thank you, George. Nice words.
By the way.
Say it again, please.
How are things in LA?
You know what? They're opening up. It's a little muggy today, but it is sunny. It's always sunny here. So, things will just open up more and more gradually.
I'm in my bunker in St. Louis, and St. Louis is starting to open up a little bit. But let's get right into our presentation. And a little bit next hour, by the way, we will take your phone calls, and Tom will tell you all about that and how to switch over and get that stuff going. We're going to talk about some UFOs and some things about my life and career on Coast to Coast, but I want you all to sit back and watch something that we're going to play for a moment, because not everything is as what it appears to be. Sometimes the eyes are very deceiving. Let's take a look.
I want you to sit at the end of the bench and lay back. You have a phone? Can you turn your phone on?
Sure.
You're going to want to remember this, trust me. And I'm going to download it if it's okay. That you can keep it as well. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
I'm going to give it to somebody to operate. Will you operate? You know how to use that?
Yeah.
Okay, turn it on. Start recording. You got it? Recording? Perfect. Okay, you're going to come over here. And what I want you to do is to put your, to sit down just like that. I want you to lay back for me. Lay back. That's good. That's good. Very nice. You want to cross your legs? Cross this leg over. There you go. Good. Just like that. That's perfect. You keep your legs like this. That's good. That's very good. Okay. Bring your arms out over here like this for me. Bring your arms out over here like this for me. Good. Okay. You married? You together? Come over here. I want you to do me a favor. You take his hands. You're going to hold on to his wrists. You're going to come over here. Are you okay?
Yeah,
Relax.
yeah, a little nervous.
And you're going to hold his ankles. Okay? You're going to hold it just like that. All right? Just don't let go. And then you two, come over here for a second. Same thing, you take her hands, her wrists, and you're gonna come over here and just, okay? Just hold her legs like this, okay? All right? And then when I tell you to, you can let them down, okay? Okay, just like that, relax. Okay. You all ready? I want you just to close your eyes, just relax yourself. Relax yourself. Pull! Relax. Where you going? Come back over here. Come back over here. Come back over here. Come back over here. Relax. Come over here. Relax. Just relax. You all right? Just relax. Relax yourself. Relax.
What the
Come over here.
What the You have my legs! What the did you do? You have to fix this! Get the back over here!
How about that, folks? Now,
George, where in the world did you come up with that?
I found that, and the illustration is with like UFO cases. Not everything as it appears to be. What you think you see are entirely different than what you know. Here's an example, of course, when I was at a UFO conference in San Jose, California years ago with the late Ed Grimsley. Ed convinced me to go on the top of a roof of a hotel. Normally, I would never do that if somebody comes up to me. Let's go to the top of the roof of a hotel. But with Grimsley, I said, okay. He had these night vision goggles, and we were looking at UFOs doing 90-degree turns, zigzags, stopping way up there in the sky. It was one of the most unbelievable things. Tom, you were there with me.
What's weird about that is we go to a lot of conferences, and for the last like maybe 4 or 5 conferences before we actually went up to the hotel top, he was following us around with a little bag.
Yeah, he was.
That was weird.
And we didn't know who he was.
Yeah, not at all.
It was kind of weird. And then on the last time that we finally got up there with him, not knowing who he was, he reaches into the bag, and I went, oh boy, here
Great.
we go. But the moral of this story is whatever you see may not be what you're seeing, what you're looking at. Now, back in 1964, there was a police officer in Socorro, New Mexico by the name of Lonnie Zamora. And Lonnie was in his cruiser going down the road, and he saw what he thought was a white car flipped over on the side of the highway down in an embankment. And he stopped, radioed for help, and then he saw two occupants scurrying around this white object. As he got closer, he realized this isn't a car accident. It's some kind of object. And those are strange beings, maybe ETs. He didn't know what the heck they were. Let's take a look.
Socorro, New Mexico is the kind of small town people are usually traveling through on their way to someplace else. Visitors rarely slow down long enough to learn that this place has a mysterious past, and that one retired Socorro police officer is still haunted by the unearthly encounter that took place here 32 years ago. Lonnie Zamora remembers April 24th, 1964. He was a rookie on the force, returning to the station after an uneventful day. Then, a speeding vehicle passed Zamora's patrol car, and he set off in pursuit.
When we got to this hill, I saw a lot of dust, and I let the speeder go, and I turned to investigate. I could see a white object sitting between those two bushes over there, and I had to come real slow because this was a messed up road, had big rocks on it and everything. I thought it was the kids from high school. They were racing up here, and maybe one of the teenagers had turned over.
When the speeding object came to a stop, Zamora claims that he saw two figures in white coveralls emerge from a strange white UFO. He moved in slowly.
I came up here on this road till I could find a flat spot where I could park my car. I got out the car and glanced down to the arroyo there, and I saw this white-looking object. It was sort of a big egg shape, bigger than a car. Those are the exact bushes that were there, and the craft was sitting right in between them two. So I started down to see what it was, and then I heard this big boom in the bottom, and fire came off the bottom. So I started running behind my police car to take cover. I could feel the heat off that because it was windy like now. And then it gradually pulled up about 20, 30 feet and stayed there for a while and then just took off.
His radio was dead. Zamora could only watch in awe as the object disappeared over the horizon. As soon as it was gone, the police radio crackled to life, and Zamora called for backup. A New Mexico State Police unit quickly arrived.
We came down here, and we saw this big rock right down here, and it was still on fire. And then we saw the imprints of the legs of the craft, and it was 4 of them. And then we saw this footprints around here.
By nightfall, the FBI had arrived on scene and began gathering evidence.
They went down there and measured the footprints and everything. And we stayed out here till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, still wondering what it was. But they didn't say what it was or not. About 9 o'clock, they said we went down to the courthouse, and we talked about it until about midnight.
That was in 1964, and we landed on the moon in 1969. And I always thought what he saw was a lunar module test with 2 astronauts, but that was not to be the case. That case, by the way, is the one that convinced Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who headed up Project Blue Book for the government, to believe in the big possibility of UFOs and extraterrestrials. He always told everyone, his son Paul Hynek told me that that was the case that got Dad to start believing in UFOs. It was an amazing case, Tom. Remember that one?
Well, I was 1 year old, but I do know about it from researching it.
I mean, after the fact, obviously.
Yes. That was one of my favorite cases. And yeah, a lot of experts do say that was a turning point in ufology.
Now, back in 1980 in the United Kingdom, there was another case where something landed in the forest of Rendlesham. Here we go.
Over 3 nights in December 1980, strange moving lights drifted through the trees of Rendlesham Forest, England. When personnel from 2 nearby U.S. air bases went out to investigate, they were unwittingly thrust into one of the most compelling and controversial episodes in UFO history. The abundance of credible witnesses, the presence of physical evidence, and the frequency and duration of contact make it nearly impossible to deny that something extraordinary happened in Rendlesham Forest, even while the US and British governments maintain otherwise. In the early hours of December 26, 1980, Airman First Class John Burroughs was guarding the gate to Woodbridge Air Base, one of two twin American air bases in Suffolk, England. In the dark of the night, Burroughs saw a pair of flashing colored lights descend into Rendlesham Forest, a nearby pine plantation, and appear to move around between the trees. Burroughs alerted Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston, who, along with Airman First Class Edward Cabanzag, came out to see the lights for himself. When Penniston received word that several local control towers had tracked an unknown object over Woodbridge Air Base, he took Burroughs and Cabanzag into the woods to investigate. Approximately half a mile into the plantation, the patrol could see white, blue, red, and yellow lights moving through the trees. They were soon joined by Master Sergeant J.D. Chandler, who also witnessed the lights. After the men lost radio functionality, Chandler and Cabanzag decided to stay behind to relay messages back to the base, while Burroughs and Penniston pressed on towards the source of the lights. What Burroughs and Penniston experienced next was like a transformation of reality itself. Walking became difficult, like wading through deep water, and they felt an electric charge in the air. When they reached an illuminated clearing, they were greeted with a bright flash of light that transformed into a metallic triangular craft. Burroughs was engulfed in a vertical beam of light that he believes may have somehow removed him from that time and space. The triangular craft measured about 3 meters in all directions, and either hovered over the ground or rested on unseen landing gear. It had a row of blue lights on the side and a white light on top. The object was smooth to the touch, like glass, save for a few roughly textured symbols that Penniston likened to Egyptian hieroglyphs. After he touched the object, the white light on top flared up until he removed his hand. He later claimed that a lengthy series of ones and zeros flashed in his head at this time, and remained in memory until he wrote them all down. After an estimated 45 minutes, the object lifted off the ground and maneuvered vertically between the branches until it cleared the top of the trees and shot off into the night sky.
It's an incredible case. Through Linda Moulton Howe, both Burroughs and Penniston appeared on Coast to Coast talking about this incredible case. I mean, there's something definitely going on. As a matter of fact, back in 2004, off the USS Nimitz, a couple Navy pilots and jets were scrambled to chase something in the air that they had no idea what it was. They couldn't catch up with it. It's a story that broke a couple of years ago, as we call the Tic Tac UFO case.
I was just going to say, anybody that wants to research more on Rendlesham, check out Nick Pope's research. He does a great job on that.
He sure does.
Go ahead, please.
Don.
Commander David Fravor still can't explain what he says he saw that day. November 2004, the Navy fighter pilot was on a training mission west of San Diego when he was ordered to check out something in the water not far away. On a clear day, over a smooth ocean, he saw the object, waves breaking over it, and says he saw something hovering above it.
It's randomly moving north, south, east, west, just random, just stopping, going the other direction, like you could do with a helicopter, but a little bit more abrupt. It looks like a 40-foot-long tic-tac with no wings.
Fravor says he and his 4-man team tracked the object for several minutes until it just disappeared. Tonight, CNN has learned the Pentagon had a secretive program to research UFOs like the one Fravor spotted. The project was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, run by an official named Luis Elizondo.
I think this is a national security imperative. We have clear things that we do not understand how they work, operating in areas that we can't control.
A defense official tells CNN the program cost at least $22 million over 5 years before it was shut down in 2012. According to the New York Times and Politico, which first reported this story, tens of millions of dollars for the project were pushed through by former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Those publications say a lot of the money for the Pentagon UFO program went to a company called Bigelow Aerospace, run by a longtime friend of Reid's, Robert Bigelow, a big believer in UFOs. Public records show Bigelow contributed about $20,000 to Reid and his political action committee.
That campaign contributor got research contracts from this program. That just is a bad picture. It doesn't look good for anybody. It's hard to imagine that something that came about that way and profited somebody who pushed for the program was a good use of taxpayer money.
A Pentagon spokesman, in fact, told CNN the program was shuttered because there were, quote, other higher priority issues that merited funding.
It's definitely crazy to spend $22 million to research UFOs. Pilots are always going to see things that they can't identify, and we should probably look into them. But to identify them as UFOs, to target UFOs to research, that is not the priority we have as a national security matter right now.
But pilots like Fravor, who says he saw something, see merits in the program.
What if it is real? Because I think it's real because I saw it. And what if there's more of these? And what if we do nothing?
Now, just a short time ago, Senator Reid responded to CNN saying he's, quote, proud of this program and its groundbreaking studies. Speak for themselves, he says. Reid says it's silly and counterproductive to politicize the serious questions raised by the work of the UFO program. The head of that aerospace firm, Robert Bigelow, did not respond to CNN's multiple requests for comment by our deadline. Wolf?
Brian, there's also information that former Senator Reid tried to keep information about this entire program out of public view.
That's right, Wolf. The New York Times says Reid acknowledged to them that he and two other senators, Ted Stevens and Daniel Inouye, both deceased, did not want public debate on the Senate floor over this program. Reid told the Times that the funding for the project was so-called black money, meaning that was secret money for classified programs. They just didn't want it talked about.
Interesting take. And of course, Senator Harry Reid has since retired, but it is one of the most incredible stories. And what it does tell you is that there's definitely something going on. And with conferences like the UFO conference that we're having right now, eventually I think disclosure is going to happen. I've always debated Stephen Bassett, of course, from Paradigm Research, who always believed, 10, 15 years ago that disclosure was going to happen. I said, not quite yet, Stephen, but I think we're getting much closer right now. And we'll see what happens. As a matter of fact, by the way, I ran into an individual here in St. Louis, where I am right now because of the COVID situation, who knows the wife of Edgar Mitchell, the ex-wife of Edgar Mitchell, former astronaut, Apollo 14, who was a staunch believer in UFOs. Edgar has passed on, but apparently the wife knows a lot more information too. She lives in the greater St. Louis area. I'm going to try to find her. Tommy?
Well, Steve Bassett, as you mentioned, has been mentioning disclosure forever, and I agree with you. I think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime, but there's one guy that deserves to celebrate when it happens. It's going to be Stephen Bassett.
Absolutely. He's been pounding away at it for a long time. Tom, in the time we've got remaining this hour, let's do a little chit chat and talk a little bit about us.
Let's talk about you, because what I wanted to do is, first of all, I wanted to talk about your family. So you grew up in Detroit. You had two younger sisters, and your father was Lebanese Egyptian, I believe. He worked for the Ford Motor Company, correct?
Yes, he did.
Your mother was Lebanese American. So tell us about your family and growing up.
Well, it's a great family that was always very supportive of things that I wanted to do and things like that. When I was 11 years old, I had an out-of-body experience. I had a fever, never really got sick, but this time I didn't feel good. I woke up and I'm on the ceiling looking down at my body. And I went, whoa, what's going on? And at that moment, whatever it was, rammed myself back into my body, and I kind of woke up and jarred. I thought it was a dream. I went to the library a couple days later and realized that what I was having was astral projection. And I got a book on that, and I was fascinated by that. At the same time, my mother was interested in UFOs and things like that. And she brought me home a book called We're Not Alone by Walter Sullivan, who was the New York Times science writer. And I was fascinated by the possibilities of extraterrestrial life, just fascinated. Then Look magazine comes out with an article called The Interrupted Journey about the Barney and Betty Hill case and that abduction case in New Hampshire. I realized at that age, 11, 12, 13 years old, I want to go into broadcasting and uncover these stories and unravel them. And here I am today doing this.
Did you tell your mom and dad what had happened to you, your experience?
I did. My mother understood it. My dad did not. He was pretty practical. She, I think, probably had some of these experiences herself. Mom's still with us. She's going to be 92 in May. And God living, she just keeps going. But she got it a little bit more than my dad did.
She's a wonderful lady, by the way. I wanted to say that.
Thank you.
So, George, as a teenager, you joined a UFO organization, NICAP. Tell us about that.
National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. It was headed by a former Air Force official by the name of Donald Kehoe. And I just noticed that they just had a little membership group investigating UFOs. And so I, mailed away for it. My mom gave me a little check for like $8 for the membership. And I got my little card a long time ago. I wish I still had it. That just says, NICAP member. But it opened up the door. We didn't have emails in those days. We didn't have the internet, but everything was done by mail. But I'd get a little mailing once a month or so from NICAP talking about UFO cases and things like that. I was hooked, Tom. I mean, that did it for me. I got books on UFOs by the authors Frank Edwards and people like that. And I just could not stop investigating and reading. I was interested in Project Blue Book with Dr. J. Allen Hynek. I was crushed when they referred things to the University of Colorado, Edward Condon. They came out with what was called the Condon Report, which kind of negated all the good UFO stories that were in Project Blue Book, basically saying these are weather anomalies or people are making this up and things like that. They never really got into the real good cases of what was so unusual, like Socorro, New Mexico, the video we just saw. But I was hooked on it. So I decided I want to go into broadcasting. Well, Dad was paying for college and he wanted me to become a dentist, as many of my relatives have been. He was not, but my relatives and cousins were. So I went into 2 years of pre-dent at the University of Detroit. And then I found out they had a broadcast curriculum there with their own closed circuit TV and radio stations. And I said, that's what I want to do. So I switched my major. Well, about a month or so later, the report card comes to the house. Dad, of course, gets it first. And he says, come here, I need to talk to you for a minute. I said, yeah, Dad, what's up? He said, well, I got your report card, but it's wrong. I said, what do you mean it's wrong? He said, well, somebody is getting A's in speech, journalism, communication, radio production. He's getting all A's, this guy. But there are no science courses in chemistry and biology for your dental stuff. We got the wrong report card. I said, no, Dad, I got to tell you something. I switched my major. He wouldn't talk to me, Tom, for 2 months.
Did your mom know?
2 months.
Did your mom know?
Yeah, I told her about that. But Dad would not talk to me for 2 months until one day. I'm working part-time then. I'm 19 years old at a television station in Detroit. And there, at the end of newscasts, they would scroll everybody who was participating in those days. We had that. And it's like they do at the end of a movie, Production assistant George Noory. He's watching the news, and he sees my name pop up. And he goes, George, come here. When I got home about 11 o'clock at night. And he said, did I just see your name on television? I said, yeah, Dad, that's where I'm working part-time while I'm going to school, full-time in broadcasting. Changed his whole perspective. He saw my name and he said, I like this.
He was very proud of you.
And he was.
So you grew up to be a talk show host. Now, tell us the story. There's a guy, I guess was a childhood friend of yours, who grew up to be, I guess you guys played together and he grew up to be the same thing he wanted to be. Do you recognize that story?
Is that the one with David Whitman, who ended up working at a television
Well, you guys
station?
would launch rockets and...
Oh, that's Gary Frank. Okay. Gary would... We used to have model rockets. There's a company called Estes, E-S-T-E-S, out of Colorado. You would buy kits, little rocketry kits, and launch rockets, put a little engine in there and everything. Well, Gary's job was to launch the rocket, put the engine in there, and then you put little electrodes in it and light it up, and it would whoosh, off it would go. My role was to broadcast the launch to the neighborhood kids. So we'd have like 20 kids out there in the park, and I'd be going 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 1, ignition. Gary would hit the button, had a little battery on it, and he'd launch the rocket with the engine. Well, I went into broadcasting, right? What did Gary do? He made the engines for the space shuttle.
No kidding.
Small world.
That's amazing. So listen, speaking of television, I was fortunate enough to meet this next guy I'm going to talk about, and you turned me on to this program. When you were growing up, you used to watch a show called The Wacky World of Dr. Morgus. Tell us about that.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about Morgus.
I first was introduced to Morgus on television back in Detroit. They had hired him from New Orleans to do the weather. But he was a zany guy. He was an actor who performed under the auspices of Morgus the Magnificent, a zany professor scientist who was insane. And every experiment that Dr. Morgus conducted went wrong. But it was a spoof. But I loved the guy. I would come home from school. He'd be given the weather. You know, hi, everybody. This is Morgus. And we're going to have our very tornadoes today, so be careful and stuff. He would also host a Saturday night movie intro. In those days, local stations did a lot of that. So he would be the host of horror films, and he'd bring people in costumes and stuff like that. But he was just zany, and I just loved him. Well, after we ended up doing Coast to Coast, I found the guy. I was talking about him on the air one day and said, if anybody knows him, let me know where he is. And we found him back in New Orleans. He had somewhat retired, but he stayed a friend of ours. He's been a guest on the show for years. Of course, he passed away a year or so ago. But what a great talent. But what's funny about him is truly every experiment he did turned into a disaster. I mean, he did one thing once where a guy was bald and he was going to make his hair grow back. So he's putting this elixir on the guy's head, rubbing it in and stuff. Keep in mind, this is a television show. All of a sudden, this guy starts growing hair. I don't know how they did it as an effect, but he starts growing hair. Anyways, his hair wouldn't stop growing. It ended up going down to the floor. So, I mean, everything he did, something went
I got to know
wrong, but he was
Sid
a great
very
guy.
well. He was a great guy, and I'm sorry he passed away.
I will always remember Sid in Los Angeles, where you flew him in as a present surprise for me. And you took him to his hotel at 2:00 in the morning in a little convertible you had. And there's you and Sid driving off into the sunset. It must have been 35 degrees out in LA. You're freezing, but driving, and Morgus is stiff as a board. It was hilarious.
We couldn't figure out what kind of surprise we wanted to get you for Christmas. And I thought, you know what? Let me check this out. So I went and I saw at that time who was Craig Kitchen, who was running our whole place at Premiere, and I told him what I wanted to do. And so we flew Sid out, and you were doing open lines. And I remember I had you go to a line where Sid was talking to you, but what you didn't know is he was standing in the hall.
Waiting
Yeah,
to come
and so
in.
he told you about a
Yeah.
time machine he invented where he could travel, and then he popped in the studio. It was just a really fun thing.
While he's talking
Yeah.
to me on the air, the sound would get a little stranger and stranger, and then he goes, "I'm in your studio, George," and there he was, the real
And
Morgus.
we replay that audio every once in a while. We should do that again soon.
And then in that scene, he said that he had the ability to block energy. And I said, well, what do you mean, Dr. Morgus? He said, well, George, this is how he talked. George, I want you to smack me in the mouth. And I said, what do you mean smack you in the mouth? He said, I want you to hit me as hard as you can, George, as hard as you can in the mouth. I said, no, I'm not going to. This is on the air now. We're doing this. And I said, no, Dr. Morgus, I'm not going to hit you in the mouth. He said, no, hit me in the mouth. Watch. You'll not get through, George. So, bam, I smack him in the mouth. We knock his tooth out. And he went, oh, my God, George, my tooth has fallen out. It was bizarre, but that's the one we played.
Another thing that didn't work with Dr. Morgus. So,
That's
George,
right.
from 1969 to 1971, talk about, you were a production assistant at WXYZ TV.
Yeah, I got my first job. A fellow by the name of David Whitman, who went to school with me, was working at that television station. He wanted to go home for Christmas. He lived in Cleveland. and they wouldn't let him. He was a production assistant. They needed him to work, things that a lot of people, took off, unless he could find a replacement to cover for him. And he came to me and he said, would you work over Christmas for me? And I still work over Christmas, by the way. But he said, would you work over Christmas for me so I can go home to Cleveland? And I said, sure. Now, I'm in the broadcast program at the University of Detroit at the time, but I had no broadcast experience or job. So I jumped at the opportunity. Well, they liked me so much, they said, we're going to keep David when he comes back, but we want you too. Would you, I was getting paid $2 an hour. And I took the job. And from 69 to 71, while I was still going to school full time, I was their production assistant at that television station. And then I decided I wanted to get into broadcasting on the air. I wanted to be a reporter. Well, I'm 21 years old. The news director at the time was a fellow by the name of Joe Vaughn. He comes up to me and he says, I want you to cut this audio tape for me. It's an audition tape. Here's some copy. Read it. I'll record it. I says, okay, Joe. So I go in this little broadcast booth. I read it. And he said, not bad. But do it again. Do it a little faster. So I said, okay. So I did it a little faster. In Detroit today, we had da-da-da-da-da. And I was done with it. And he said, George, that was great. That was great. And I said, Joe, did I get the job? And he said, I don't have a job for you, George. I want you to take that tape and go find one. So I did. And then I took it to a news director by the name of John Webster, who has since passed. And he heard it and he said, I'm looking for a reporter, $149 a week. Were you interested? And I said, well, I go to school, Mr. Webster. But he said, we'll work around your school, or you go to school at night and work during the day. Well, we'll work it out for you. You want this job? And I took it. And that was the beginning of my on-air experience.
Talk about your first job in radio. Was that WCAR?
That was it. That was the one that I went to and got that job.
Okay. And then from 73 to 74, I believe you were at WWJ-TV?
Yep. I decided time to get into television, back into TV. Of course, I was a production assistant from 69 to 71 at WXYZ-TV. I applied for a producer's job at the NBC station in Detroit. And the news director by the name of Lou Prado said, you know what? You great experience. You got your degree. You're hired. And that started my broadcast career in television again at WWJ-TV. And I produced newscasts for them, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock in Detroit. That's when they came on, and really gained a lot of experience. And that's at the point another television station in 74 picked me up, WJBK TV2, and I went as a producer, executive news producer, and I stayed there until 1978.
And then about a year later, I think it was in 79, you won your first of 3 Emmys. Talk a little bit about that.
I've got 3 Emmy Awards for television production. One was a blizzard in Detroit. The other 2 were in St. Louis for news coverage and design work. I designed a set that was pretty novel at the time. And I had gone to Minneapolis a year before that as a news director. From there, a station in Detroit, in St. Louis, heard about me, brought me to St. Louis, where I still am in St. Louis, and brought me aboard. But we won our Emmys and developed a pretty good group of newscasts and people like that. And that took me all the way up to 1982. And then I went into professional public relations corporately, because I needed that kind of experience. I wanted to start buying and raising money to build my own companies, and I needed that corporate background to do that. So I did that for 3 years, bought my own television production company, sold it, and did a horse farm after that for about 3 years.
And then you served 9 years in the Naval Reserve. What was that like?
That was great. It was a great experience. Retired as a full lieutenant. 1 more year, I would have been a lieutenant commander. We were public information officers, but our unit got called up to Desert Storm back in 1991, but I had just retired a month earlier, so I didn't go. But they all came back. We were assigned to General Schwarzkopf, and we were working directly for him. My unit was. And my guys came back with ribbons and all kinds of honors from Desert Storm. but I had gotten out, Tom. I spent 10, 11 years in the Navy. That's long enough.
Well, listen, from me and I'm sure from everybody else, thank you for serving. We always thank everybody that calls to the show, and
thank you.
So we need to thank you. Talk a little bit more about your horse farm. I'm interested in that.
Well, when I was at the television station back in 69, 71, there was a courier there. His name was Frank, and Frank had invested in a racehorse. Cost him $2,000 to buy a share of a racehorse. And he asked a bunch of us if we would want to do it. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I bought a little share of one too, but I got back for my $2,000 investment, $4,000. And it was really cool. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And I just started getting into it. Well, when I sold my television production company, I had enough money to buy a horse farm and, decided just to sit back for a few years and not really work, which wasn't very smart because I realized the money goes away pretty darn fast when you're not working. But I did a horse farm with a number of horses and ended up having 72 racehorses, mares that I bred, and we had a great time doing that. But I did that for several years. I think I lost money on that project.
But it was fun. You had some fun. So listen, you've gone through the broadcasting industry. You've probably seen it all. Do you have a favorite, dead or alive, broadcaster? Like maybe somebody that you really, really thought was exceptional?
Well, I've always enjoyed Walter Cronkite. And I had an honor of meeting him in Los Angeles a year or so before he passed away. He had retired from CBS News. And I remember him walking right past me. And I said, I have got to use this opportunity to say hello. I can't let this miss me up. So I walk up to him. I go, Mr. Cronkite, George Noory, love your work. He goes, yes, I am. That was the way he did his thing. He was a good old guy. But, what I liked about him was he was fair and balanced. Today with news, you really don't know what you're getting anymore. You don't know if you're getting opinion or the facts or fake news. Cronkite put it right on the line. He never voted for president. I mean, I learned that from him. He wanted to remain unbiased. He did not want to go on the air and say, I voted for this candidate or I voted for that. He stayed out of it. You could never accuse him of favoritism. He called it the way he saw it. And I like that about him. And those kinds of old news folks, they're gone right now, and we need to get them back.
So I happen to know you have a fascination with Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. Talk about that.
Well, that came much later in life, probably during the Coast to Coast days. As you know, I select most of our bumper music that we play during the programs every night. And I like picking some old Frank Sinatra stuff, but during your live events that you put on all around the country, I'll do some Frank Sinatra songs and stuff like that. But I'm just fascinated by what they did in Las Vegas, the group that they did. He was tremendous for civil rights. He helped bring the career of Sammy Davis Jr. along. There was a time that Davis would perform in Vegas. The hotel he worked at refused to let him stay there or eat there. That's how crazy this was a long time ago. And Frank one day finally said, unless you let Sammy in the hotel, in the restaurant, I'm not performing. And that was pretty gutsy of him, but they backed down and they let Sammy come in and do his thing. And I've always admired him for that. He had some questionable backgrounds with some mobsters and stuff.
Nobody's
like that,
perfect, right?
But he did a great job for what he
I
did.
also know that you can talk hours on end about the JFK assassination.
I know that very well. As you know, we do our annual JFK show on Coast to Coast. It's an incredible story. I am a believer that the mob killed JFK. They were after his brother Bobby, but they figured, you got to cut the head of the dog off first, not the tail. And that's what they decided to do. And it was a horrendous situation. The mob helped JFK get elected. I mean, they doctored results in West Virginia and Chicago. and through Father Joe, they helped him get elected, and they felt that Kennedy had turned on them through Bobby, and they were out to make a big change, and they did. And Jimmy Hoffa might have been involved in that mess. Ironically, I was one of the last reporters to talk to Hoffa back in '75. When I invited him on our newscast, he physically came in and we interviewed him. And I walked him to his car and had a long conversation with him about his wanting to get back into the Teamster Union presidency. But later on in life, in more of my research on the JFK assassination, his name kept popping up too as one of those possibilities, involved with the same players that I'm convinced did Kennedy.
I think there's hundreds of people right now chomping at the bit to give you their opinion on that. I want to talk a little bit about life. We're all here. It's all going to end. Give us your thoughts on the afterlife. What do you think it's like? Is there an afterlife?
There were times I had my doubts, but as I got later on in life, I realized that there's something more complex about what we're doing on this, the universe, the Big Bang, things that people really can't explain. And, you know, we really can't explain God. But what I am convinced about today, Tom, is that we live in a very complex universe that has been intelligently designed. You can't have what we have in the universe and it all works, it all fits, it's just perfect aligned. It just is what it is. That doesn't happen by accident. So it's very common now for me to assume that after we die, the soul or whatever it might be moves on to another plane of existence. And then, you know, if you believe in reincarnation, so be it. But I am now convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's something on the afterlife and that we exist forever.
So while you're on this plane, would you consider yourself lucky?
Joseph Gallenberger wrote a book called Liquid Luck about how you can change your luck by your attitude. And I would say I've been very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. But, and here's the caveat, you gotta be ready when the time calls and you're ready to do something. If I wasn't in a position to do Coast to Coast when they called and said, we want you to fill in for Art Bell, I would have fallen on my face. And it worked. You have to be ready for the unexpected. You have to be prepared, and you got to be ready to go.
Knowing what you know now about the industry and everything you've been through, what would you say to a 16-year-old George Noory?
Work your tail off. Give 120% every day, and always be available if they call you, no matter what. There were times that when they would call me to replace Art at night, I'll tell you an interesting story. I was doing my Nighthawk show in St. Louis, which ran from 9 to midnight. Coast to Coast in the Midwest runs from midnight to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Right after I was off the air, I would be called sometimes 10 minutes before airtime. They would tell me at the network level, we don't know if Art's on tonight. I said, what do you mean you don't know if he's on tonight? They said, we don't know if he's going on tonight. We've been told to either run a tape or something. We want you to be his backup. I said, well, I'm on the air for 10 more minutes. What do I do? They said, well, we're gonna email you real quickly the guest material for tonight, and we'll hook you up in your other studio. We had another studio at KTRS at the time. And he said, you go in there at midnight. We start the opening theme. If you don't hear Art Bell's voice, go. You're on. If we do hear it, you go home. And we'll still pay you. And I said, no, I don't want to get paid unless I do the show. That was a smart thing I did. They always remembered me for that. So I'm in the studio. I get done with my Nighthawk show. I'm holding my emails. Tonight's guest is, Graham Hancock or somebody like that. I run down into the other studio, put my other headsets on, and all of a sudden the Coast to Coast theme starts. Bump, 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 bump. And I'm going, and the guy's talking to me in my ear. He's saying, if we don't hear Art, start. And about 2 out of 3 times, I wouldn't hear Art's voice. And he'd go, go, you're on. And I'd go, from the City of Angels or wherever I was at the time.
Must have been nerve-wracking.
And off I went. It was kind of tense.
Tell us the significance of the song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone?
Well, when I was first doing my local show in St. Louis back in 1996, it was a talk show. Well, they weren't used to that station being a talk show station. So I'm on the air. I don't know how many people are listening. And I'm asking for phone calls because I'm doing a talk show, right? Nobody's calling. And I'm going, this is horrible. Coast to coast, every line we have is lit every night, all the time, as you well know. Nobody's calling in St. Louis. And I'm going, this is crazy. I got 3 hours. I'm doing a talk show, and no one's calling. I got this great idea to play Where Have All the Flowers Gone? And so I'm playing the song by Peter, Paul, and Mary. Where have all the flowers gone? And right before flowers comes up, I pot it down and I go, phone calls. So the song basically was, where have all the phone calls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the phone calls gone? Long time ago. I kept doing that until somebody started calling. I see the light coming on the phone. We pick it up and I put the guy on the air and he says, George, listening to your show, what does it take to get you to stop playing that song? And I said, don't hang up. And then the second call came and the third call came and then it started. And we literally made an award-winning talk show out of a goofy
That's a
song.
great story. So I wanted to bring up for a minute one of my favorite shows, A Christmas Carol. In the very beginning of the movie, Scrooge is visited by the very first ghost, which is his business partner, Jacob Marley. He doesn't really believe it's a ghost, so he says, you could be a...
Who reminds
Jacob
me of
Marley?
you, by the way.
Why?
Yes. In
Okay,
chains.
fair
It
enough.
just does. I don't
So
know.
he looks at the ghost and he says, I don't know, you could be a bit of mustard, a blot of something, or a fragment of underground potato. So what I want to ask you is, do you believe in apparitions? Have you ever seen one? And what happens?
I've never seen a ghost, but I do believe in them. We've gotten enough calls on Coast to Coast. We've talked to enough experts who have. And so there is something very strange there. The Christmas Carol, of course, as I quote something from that movie all the time, as you know, are these things that will be or could be when people talk about the future. Do we have the ability to change the future, or are we stuck with the future? And, that's a very perplexing question. Can we change the outcome of a prediction? If a psychic says, you're going to have 900 people die from this disease, can we change that by, coming up with some remedy before it happens? I've always believed we can do that.
So George, in the last few minutes before we go to the Q&A, I wanted to ask you, there's a few people that I have never interviewed, and I don't think you have, but we're going to get pretty close today, okay? So my first question for you, Mr. James Stewart, is, do you believe in reincarnation?
Mr. James Stewart, the actor who has passed on? You want me to go into that mode, don't you?
I just asked the question.
Yes, Tom, I believe in reincarnation. There's no doubt about that.
I wish I could hear the laughs right now.
That's about all you're going to get out of me on that one.
Fair enough. So then my next question is, tell us, please.
Or the cries.
Say it again. Or the cry.
The cries. You said the laughs.
So my next question, I'd like to know, Mr. Cronkite, if we did indeed go to the moon.
Yes, we did on July 1969. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS.
And my final question for you, Mr. John Kennedy, is I want to know if you believe in life on other planets.
Not only is there life on other planets, but we choose to go to the moon to find out.
Very good, George. Not bad at all. So, George, listen, you were in Mexico a while back. You had a brush with a little trouble. We have a couple minutes left, so tell us about that.
Went to Mexico with a friend of mine, and on the way home, we were in a van limo. It was a van. And the driver had a two-way squawk situation. Not a telephone, but a squawk box and a two-way radio. And he was nervous beyond all get-up, speaking in Spanish really fast. I speak a little Spanish, but not that quickly. And he was shaking and stuff like that. And I realized he's taking us through this seedy area of town, not where the airport normally is. That's where we're supposed to go. And all of a sudden, these cars are showing up, kind of like blocking him and stuff. And I'm going, this is weird. This is going to be a robbery, and I think we're the victims. So I reach for the latch of the door lock to try to open the door. You know, I'm on the side of a van door. The latch has been sawed off. It breaks off in my hand. Can't get out the back. Can't get out. We grab the suitcases from the back behind us, jump over the driver's side seat, and we get out through the driver's side door. At that moment, some kid is coming by driving his old car. I hold up $100 and just say, airport. Meanwhile, there's all these other cars around this van with guys getting out. This kid stops. We throw our luggage in his car and we take off. And they're chasing us. But we get to the airport and they back off. We get out and we get back to wherever we're going, St. Louis, LA. Come to find out, Homeland Security gets involved in it. It's a Google the story, George Noory kidnapped in Mexico. It pops up. They said that they were going to ATM me to death until the money ran out, which in my case would have been pretty fast. It was a tense situation. You got to be very careful when you travel abroad.
So we have a couple of minutes before we're going to switch everybody over to the Q&A. So as your last question for this portion of it, tell me about Bigfoot. Do you believe in Bigfoot?
I think there's a creature out there. I don't think it's dimensional. I think it's physical. There's something strange about it. I don't know why we haven't found one or captured one, but it's there. My personal belief is that it is a missing link between human and ape. It's kind of in the middle, but they're out there. I have believed it since I used to read about the abominable snowman in the Himalayas, which was this white, hairy creature. Well, Bigfoot is brown and much taller, but there is something very strange about that. It's an interesting, as you know, our fill-in host, Connie Willis, loves Bigfoot shows.
Do you think there's a connection between Bigfoot and aliens? Some people say they are aliens.
No, I don't. I don't. You're right. Some people think that Bigfoot may be extraterrestrial, plopped down here. I don't. L.A. Marzulli, who was just on our program last week, believes that they may be seeded from an ET race with whatever we had on our species at the time, that it's a hybrid of some sort. I think it's just an earthbound creature.
So here's what we're going to do now. We're very close to Q&A, and I know that you've got a surprise for us. So before we do start the Q&A, we'll let people line up. And again, you click ask to share audio and video, and that will put you in the queue to talk to George. George, you have a surprise for us. Tell us about it.
All right, Thomas, let's get rolling into this. Back in 2013, I had this great opportunity to interview Dolores Cannon. Dolores Cannon, of course, being very influential in the Ozark Martin UFO conference for so many years. In 1996, back in St. Louis, I had my first opportunity to interview Dolores because she's a hypnotherapist, and I was fascinated by her work. Well, jump ahead, I'm doing Coast to Coast, and I brought Dolores in as a guest. But back in 2013, I had an opportunity to talk with her. This, of course, being her conference too, I wanted to play a short portion of that interview. And we'll get into the Q&A. Fantastic interview. Just had a great time with that. Great time indeed.
George, what a wonderful lady.
Oh, she was one of a kind. She was always one of our most sought after guests on Coast to Coast. And we've had so many great guests I've passed on, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Glenn Kimball, and people like that. But she was one of a kind, Tom. She not only helped put this Ozark conference together, but she loved the subject matter, and you could really tell she was in it. And I had a kick out of it. When I first interviewed her back in 1996, I'm in St. Louis doing my local show. She's in Arkansas, in the Ozarks. And I'm going, God, she's so close. One day, if I ever make it big, I'm putting her on the air. And she was already on with Art, as she mentioned. But what a great lady.
Well, from the look of the chat, she touched a lot of people, and she really was a wonderful lady. So let's start with some questions, some Q&A. Or let's see if Ellie Draw is there. Ellie Draw.
Glad this isn't the radio show right now. Huh?
It should pop up in a minute. Ellie, are you around?
I am. Can you hear me?
Here comes Ellie. Yep. There you are, Ellie. Hi.
Ellie, hi there.
Well, hi there. I didn't expect to be on your little show here.
Ellie, where are you watching from?
Hey, by the way, Tom, make sure you tell everybody to click the muted on their microphone, because Ellie's doesn't have that cross hatch on it.
Yeah,
so
everybody has to do that.
Hear you.
Ellie, where are you watching this from?
Tucson, Arizona.
Oh,
very
great.
Nice.
You having a good time with the conference?
Well, I just found out about it and signed up last night, so I missed all the ones yesterday. And I thought, well, what the heck?
How'd you hear about it?
Well, I'm finding myself in this because I'm a telepath I was working for the military in the last couple of years. And I found out a whole lot of information, and I thought, oh my God. How am I going to put all this information together in a way that makes sense? And, disclosure, you guys have done such a great job already on disclosure. And we really are already moving past that. And the downloads that are coming in for people are really, how do we move forward into the Aquarian age without all this new age nonsense? I mean, I'm finding out that there's a lot of people who are being contacted, because I'm getting contacted by young people who have been using psychedelics and getting contacted.
Yeah, it's out there, and it's changing. This metamorphosis is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you sense it. You see it all the time.
Well, I'm a healer. I came into this as a healer, and I had a 16-year-old who got contacted on psychedelics and said, can you get this lady some psychedelics? And I said, they studied me in 2007. Those of us who meditate and do healing work and that, we're already at those frequencies. And so I said, what's it going to take to get somebody who's already at those frequencies up into the telepathic frequencies? And I had to take a whole half a bag of mushrooms. and I said, what are you kids doing? I mean, this is the healing field. I mean, this is familiar to us. What the hell are you guys doing up here? And then he said, well, you were asked to come up into these frequencies. And so I opened myself up to it. And holy cow.
Tommy, mute your phone, by the way.
I got a download of information, and I'm recovering from PTSD. That's why I'm here in Tucson right now.
Okay, good. Everything's going well for you?
It's a process. I can say our government and our diplomatic people, they don't need people bitching at them. They need prayers. And I found out the biggest force in the field is prayer. It's a blue light frequency that we're starving from. Turns out I'm a clairvoyant researcher, when they put all of the drugs in Schedule 1, they didn't know that they were going to start starving us from an actual biological frequency that we need in order to hear up into these telepathic frequencies.
Well, you sound like you're tuned in, Ellie.
Oh my God. This is the Grandmother's Council that was coming through, and they are geneticists and they are not happy.
Right, Ellie, thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the work you guys are doing.
You're very welcome.
By the way,
George
Don has written us, Tommy wants to know if we've heard anything about the military and UFOs. It's supposed to be forthcoming in June. We've got George Knapp working on that. So as soon as we get any information, we'll put that on. And another one of our listeners and viewers wants to know if I'd ever interview an ET if available. Absolutely.
That's a no-brainer there. We're waiting. Here comes Brandy.
There's
I'm
Brandy.
here.
Hey, Brandy. Good to see you.
Good to see you. We do have a question from Lance. He asked, what do you know about any ET technology for humanity?
Well, we really don't know what we know about ET technology because the government isn't really telling us. But we can assume we have used ET technology for all kinds of things. If you believe the late Philip Corso, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, who wrote the book The Day After Roswell with our friend Bill Burns, we have all kinds of reversed engineered technology, from medicine to technology to machinery. So who knows what we really have, other than look how far we've advanced in 100 years. It's truly remarkable. Roswell was 1947, so it's been 70 years, something like that. Look what we've done. I'm convinced we have reverse technology, and we're using it in all kinds of applications.
All right. We have another question here. Looks like, okay, you answered on the military one. And we have Rhonda that is asking, what is your favorite subject to interview about?
I like them all. I love the changing topics because they're always different and they're challenging for me, whether they're paranormal, UFOs, spiritual, afterlife, conspiracies, breaking news stories. I like them all. I really do. That's not a cop-out to your question, but I just like the changing topics every day. We put in 2 guests a night now because we found out in our research if somebody didn't like the guest, they would kind of wander away. Now we give them 2 guests, so the odds are much higher that these folks are going to stick around. So
Hey,
that's why we do that.
George, Christina in the chat says she loves hearing Kevin Randall, but she wants you to tell everybody about Peter Davenport if he's okay.
Peter had an illness that prevented him from continuing the program, and we have not heard back from him as far as how he's doing or feeling. Great guy, does a great job for us. Maybe we can check back with him, Tom. But
yeah, I can check with him next week. So, George, I'd like you to talk a little bit. We champion insulating the grid on the show. Why is that so important?
Well, because without power, we're not even doing these Zooms anymore. Everything goes. And we live on energy, electronic energy. We've got to have it, folks. ATMs, stores, TVs, radios. If the grid goes down, we go down. They estimate 90% of the Americans would die within the first year if the power goes out. We got to protect the grid. Got to protect it.
Charlie is asking, do you think free energy technology is being withheld from us?
Well, let me tell you this.
And welcome, Mary. We'll get to you in a minute. Sorry, George.
You just said the word, free. Nobody wants to give away anything for free. They want us to pay for it. So yes, they're withholding the ability of giving us cheaper or free energy. Absolutely.
Okay, let's welcome Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Welcome, Mary.
We can hear you okay. Where are you watching from, Mary?
Oh, Palm Bay, Florida, near where Cape Canaveral is. Rockets going up all the time.
Go ahead and fire at George.
Okay. My husband and I, we make Tesla
Oh, she froze
and
up
other Tesla technologies
Tesla coil,
for healing people. Been doing this for many years. So one day,
Yeah, I mean,
Is he there?
I'm listening.
Okay. So one day, my husband Mark is making an unusual Tesla coil, 750,000 volt, but he's tuning it in a different way. And all of a sudden he looks up and there's a gray alien watching him. Immediately, Mark just drops his tool and starts to go toward him, unlike what I would do. And then it just disappeared. And then a few days before that, outside apartment building that we were staying in were these aliens that were outside the window on a platform. They were clear, shimmery, like the Predator, and there are three sitting side by side on a platform that was moving slowly by the window, looking in. They had like cone-shaped heads, long arms, working on and so, it's not just a Tesla coil we're making, but other Tesla
Do you think the
technologies.
coils?
So why would
they somehow have opened up a portal for these things? I think.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What you
There's
thought?
some kind of electronics has broken down a barrier, allowing these ETs to come through.
I mean, 130 years Tesla coils have been out there, and not really a lot of people have made them. But it's somehow it attracted them, but it's old.
Absolutely.
So to me, it's like, why would they really bother?
Did you say 700 volts?
750,000.
Whoa!
750,000
That's
volts.
a lot of voltage.
Yeah, but the milliamps.
Yeah, but still.
Oh yeah, it heals people like that.
It better.
But yeah. Well, you're not hooked up to it. You just don't point your finger at it and go, "Oh, look at the pretty light."
They
But
a portal, Mary, somehow. My opinion.
Yeah,
Hey, Mary, how's your weather,
that's
weather out there
interesting.
in Florida?
Somehow it broke into the other dimension. Excuse me?
It's the same all the time, Tom. It either rains or it's sunny.
Is it raining or sunny today, Mary?
It's raining right now.
Well, listen,
it's
thank
great.
you so much for joining us.
I have a
Thanks, Mary.
Okay.
By the way,
Thank you.
we have a question, Tom, about Linda Moulton Howe, our great researcher, and they want to know if she'd be invited back as a guest. Of course, absolutely. Linda decided to move on to do her YouTube channel because she was just doing too many things. So she's concentrating on that. But Linda's always welcome back on
We're
the
waiting for Ellie now. Ellie, are you there? See if Ellie pops in, George.
Are you controlling?
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
Tom?
we're clicking away, but sometimes there's a little delay here. In the meantime, George, if you could go anywhere in the world that you haven't been, where would you go?
I want to go to Monaco. My buddy Prince Albert is running that little country, handed down by his father, Prince Rainier. And I would love to go to Monaco to spend some time, except I don't take vacations, so I don't think I'll ever be going.
You guys sure you wanted me back again?
Yeah, why not, Ellie? But before, George, favorite movie?
It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart.
Favorite thing for dinner?
It's a classic movie. Turkey and mashed potatoes.
And I know the answer to this one. Favorite book?
Mine.
The one when you were growing up. That's the answer.
We are not alone.
Ellie?
Hello again.
Take it away.
Well, I got contacted telepathically when I was 5 years old. Got my first assignment when I was 5 years old. I was in kindergarten, and the question that these beings wanted to know is why we couldn't communicate with them. And so I was held at a level where I never did drugs through my whole entire life at all. And at 55, I got cannabis for pain. And I realized that cannabis brings you up into a frequency that you can hear things on these channels. And I was told that it was in World War II that the Native Americans worked with the military to set up these communication channels. They're called telepathic communication networks. And these are really familiar to those of us who work in the healing profession, but I didn't know that the military had weaponized it. And it got weaponized to the point when I joined them to assist them to sort things out, that there were so many remote viewers on these special drugs that they have made that they've put us out of balance with nature. And so we had people coming in to tune up our planet, to bring us out of whatever this tragedy has happened.
Have you, Ellie? Have you tried CBD?
I have used CBD. It turns out that there's those of us who pray and meditate. We don't get high on this stuff. It doesn't make us high. It just makes us kind of expanded.
No, it's not they took out the ingredient
Right.
that makes you high, and it really works well for pain, much better than pharmaceuticals.
By
that's
far,
for sure.
by far. But what we do have, something that is happening here, is that we have to get healers, and a bunch of these Christian Germans trained in the healing and spiritual arts, because what's happening is that we've got almost 3 generations of kids on the street now doing these drugs. But because of my Qigong practice and my healing practice, I recognize these guys are way down in the yin aspect. They can't function in a normal kind of way. And yet they're brilliant. And so when they use these drugs, it puts their minds up working faster to work with the telepaths who are in the field. And then they go home at the end of the day, and then they just go back to their 3D normal. But I believe that what I have found is that there's different frequencies. So our elders, they don't have dementia. It's like smoking cannabis. They're in the same frequency as dementia and smoking cannabis, and they need to be pulled back down into their body. But I believe it's nature's way of helping us start to go out of the body for when we transition to the timelines that are right next to us.
Ellie,
Looks like
thank you for those thoughts, and
three of
thanks
them.
for popping back in. I want to bring in Brandy again. Brandy, are you there? She's going to pop in. Yeah.
Questions?
Hi, Brandy.
Hi, we
Welcome.
do have some more questions. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tom.
No, go ahead.
We have a question here from Tracy. It says, who had been your most fascinating UFO interview?
Oh, now that's a great question. The ufologists we've had on, from Whitley Strieber to all kinds of people, have been just tremendous. They all bring to us, Brandy, a different perspective on the show, whatever they may be. And so once again, like the question of what are your subjects that you like, I would say that's the same thing in terms of the UFO people, because they all bring a different perspective, and they all are fascinating. I've liked them all. Even the one lady who used to date an ET, Pamela Stonebrook was her name. That was kind of fascinating too.
Okay, and we have another one here from Christina. It looks like, what is, in your opinion, the most outlandish theory that you have heard that you think might actually be a reality?
I'll tell you the most outlandish theory I've heard that I don't think is a reality first, and that is that the planet Earth is flat. I think we're round. The pictures I've seen from astronauts in space clearly show a globe. I don't think we have a flat Earth. That one to me is outlandish, that I don't believe. Outlandish that I do believe, let me think about that for a second. Probably things like the chupacabras and things like that people don't believe in. Some people don't believe in, but I think they're true. I think they happen.
And I also wanted to ask you, why do you think there are so many different reported species of ETs?
Because it's one heck of a universe, and it's pretty big. There are lots out
Thanks,
there.
Brandy.
Look at us, just the 3 of us. Look how different we are, just sitting
true.
here
That's
right
so
now.
true. All right.
Thank you, Brandy. I'll
Thank
pop you
you.
back in if we have some more. Thanks
Okay.
for coming in. George, we're so lucky we get to travel around, and I'll tell you, some weird things have happened over the years. Tell the story about the psychic vampire at the blackjack table. It's one of my favorites.
Oh, we had a live event in Las Vegas. And after, of course, you want to go out for a little drink or have some fun. And you had the idea for us to play a little blackjack. So we sat down in a casino at a blackjack table, you, me, and some other guy that we didn't know. This is an unusual blackjack table. They had a wheel that you would spin. You would put a little dollar in a circle. And if you got a blackjack and you had a dollar down, you had the ability to spin the wheel, and they would give you whatever the wheel pointed to, from $0 to $1,000. There's this huge wheel. So I had $1 down. I had a blackjack, and the dealer said, now you guys can spin the wheel and get the prize. So the wheel is spinning, and Tommy and I are doing our energy mind control thing, going, let's concentrate on the $1,000. And it's going click, 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 click. It's getting really close to $1,000. The other guy, who we didn't know, goes, this doesn't work. It's a bunch of malarkey. It stopped one click before $1,000. The guy killed us.
It's unbelievable.
Killed us.
And of course, I have to have you relate the story. We were in Austin, Texas, coming out of the radio station. It must have been 4 a.m. and you fell in a puddle of mud. What happened? It's
on YouTube, by the way. All you have to do is Google
it
George
is.
Noory
The funny part of the story is the window washers.
It was a 10-foot hole. I mean, I just went right down and plopped right back up. I kept walking. Something kept me up. We were with Alex Jones at the time.
And the next day, though, those were the only clothes you had. So me and one of the producers, we went and bought you some stuff.
To get me some new clothes. Yep. For this live event.
So let me ask you, I want to get your thoughts on some notable people that are no longer with us, okay? Let's start with Neil Armstrong.
Well, he was a great astronaut, first man to walk on the moon, civilian, and he was just a wonderful interview with the times that he did interviews with people. He had not done one with me. I missed that opportunity, but he'll always be remembered as the first man on the moon.
You and I had the very unique pleasure of spending what is probably the last day with a guy named Stanton Friedman. Talk about Stanton.
Now, you talk about UFOs, you got to talk about Stanton Friedman. Back when I was 21 years old, he was my first radio interview in Detroit. First radio interview, Stanton Friedman. I loved it. He came to town, and I interviewed him, and it was great. Well, in Columbus, Ohio, we had a live stage show, and Stanton was one of our guests. And I interviewed him, had a great time. He left the next morning to go back to Canada, keeled over and died in the airport in Toronto, which was his connecting flight. The ironic part about all this, he was my first radio interview, and I was his last radio interview when he died.
What a guy. I was probably the last guy to talk to him. He called me, and there was some mix-up with his car. So he did, and we had to keep him over another night. And then the next morning he called me. He said, where do I wait for my car, Tom? Great, Stan. And I said, just sit there, Stan. It's coming for you. And that's the last I heard of him, and then I heard he passed away. Very sad. I miss him.
He probably passed away
at
right
the airport.
after that.
George, talk about Rod Serling.
Rod was great. Mark Zicree, of course, who's written books on the Twilight Zone, used to rummage through Rod's attic looking for old scripts. The guy was a genius. When he came up with the Twilight Zone, he was a writer before that, but he came up with an incredible concept that still lives on to this day. And he's surely missed. His wife just passed away about a year ago as well. But Rod Serling was a giant.
Yeah, I think genius is the appropriate word. Let me bring up Bud Hopkins. Yep. What are your thoughts on Bud?
Bud was great. He was an expert in investigating alien abduction cases. Another great hole that has not been filled yet. But he was one of the best and a great guest when he was
one of my
alive.
favorite people to research. Talk about Houdini.
Harry Houdini, one of a kind, the great escape artist, got punched in the stomach in Detroit and ended up dying of a ruptured appendix. But he was performing great stuff. I'll remember Harry Houdini with the movie of Tony Curtis playing Houdini in the movie. And
I got three more, and then we're going to go to Brandy, who has another question. Talk about Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Okay. I never met Dr. Hynek. I know his son, Paul, but the fact that he switched over and became a believer in UFOs, created the Center for UFO Center in Chicago, and was a wonderful man. He will always be haunted by his theory of swamp gas, which he said in Michigan in a news conference back in the late 60s. And he would always regret saying that.
Somebody I think was just really awesome. Talk about Gene Roddenberry.
I never knew Gene, but he created Star Trek and did a great job with that series that still lives on to this day. I mean, look at all the movies and follow-up shows.
All the
that have
Trekking.
been done. And William Shatner, by the way, just turned 90. Captain Kirk,
Wow.
90 years old. Can you believe that?
And I think I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Dolores Cannon. We just listened to a great interview that you
Dolores
did with her.
Was great. Everybody loved that interview. All the comments that we have on the screen here are fantastic. But she was a great person and loved what she did. I had a chance to interview her first in 1996, and just look forward to interviewing her on Coast to Coast when I'm.
Okay, let me bring Brandy back in. Brandy, you there? Pop back in, Brandy. I know I saw you just a minute ago. There you are. Welcome back.
Here she is.
Thank you. We got another question from Kayla. It says, George, what is your opinion on missing people and the 411 phenomenon?
David Paulides and his research, it's the scariest stuff we've interviewed in a long, long time. People just simply disappearing in parks. Sometimes little kids walking behind their parents a foot away. They turn around, the kid's gone. It's bizarre. I think what's happening, they're going through some kind of portal or dimension, and they can't find their way back. Some of them are found dead later, you know, with their clothes neatly tucked. That's weird too, but it's a strange phenomenon. My guess is they're going into some portal, some other dimension, and they can't find their way back.
And we have Christina, which is George. Who do you think is doing the most notable research in alternative subjects now? For instance, do you have a particular researcher that you follow in the consciousness realm?
I think most researchers are doing a pretty good job. Dr. Bruce Goldberg in hypnotherapy is a good one. Our own George Knapp in UFOs and his research is fantastic. They're all fantastic. Dr. Gary Schwartz in afterlife studies, he's doing a great job. Dr. Raymond Moody, afterlife studies, he's doing a great job. We are blessed with a lot of people on this planet who have been studying and are into everything from the pyramids to afterlife to UFO research. They're just all
George, I want to keep this fun, but I did want to ask you, how do your thoughts now compare differently to when we first heard the story about the lab in Wuhan and the virus?
I have not changed at all. I am still convinced that the virus was concocted in that laboratory. What I don't know is whether it was released intentionally or by mistake, but I am convinced it was made there as a bio-warfare weapon. And look at the havoc it's done on this
Well,
planet.
I think we're going to get through it eventually. And I have one more question for you, and then we'll bring Forrest in to wrap it up. George, where do you see our country in the next 10 years?
I think we're going to be strong. You know why, Tom? Because of people dedicated to this conference, for example. They care about things, and with Americans like that, we cannot be defeated. We're going to be okay.
Listen, everybody, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know George appreciates it. I do. So, yeah, thanks for
Loved it.
coming
This
out.
was fun. I love the live. I love
We'll
live
be back.
shows.
We
but
will be
this was
back.
fun.
Forrest, come on in. I think I got to click you in, and then you can give us some final thoughts. And there's your little. I'm having trouble with my mouse. Bear with me 1 second here.
Can I do my Forrest Gump impressions while we wait?
Go. There's Forrest.
Hey.
Hold on. We have to hear Forrest
There
Gump.
he is.
Yeah, do it. Do it. Do it.
Lieutenant Dan, you ain't got no legs.
What do you think, Forrest? 5, 6 on the scale?
I think you should stick to emceeing a radio show and not switch to that new career of impersonating people.
Well, in that case, stupid is as stupid does.
Thanks again, everybody. Forrest, take it away.
Tom and George, thank you guys so much for being here and sharing all your wonderful stories.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I know everybody enjoyed it, I'm sure, and I'm hoping that you and I can have a drink while you're still in St. Louis. So we'll work on that. Last thing I have is on the events tab before you all leave. On the events tab on your right, if you click on event instead of session in the chat window, at the very, very top, you'll see a note in there by Adnan that gives you the path and the password to connect with Whitley Strieber's video that we told you we were going to try and post so that you could watch it again if you want to get better audio quality. So that link will be up for the remainder of the day. Copy it down if you want to watch it tomorrow or Tuesday, so that it'll be up for another couple of days, but you'll need to copy the link down and the password to get in and see that video. So with that, this brings us to the end of the 33rd Ozark Mountain UFO Conference virtual.
Great job.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes. There's a lot of wizards back there. You've met them that are pulling the levers, and so I'm very happy we were able to do this, and I do also desperately hope we can do it in person next year. So thank you all for coming, and we will see you here.
Thanks, Forrest.
Thank you. Bye, folks.